Hi, I'm Susan Aglukak, Susan Aglukao Yunga, and I am a National Arts Center teaching artist. And this is part 3 of my 4-part series called Your Lens, My Eyes, Reflections on Truth and Healing. In part 2, I talked about perceptions and perceptions created by words, and how words used as descriptors of my ancestors silenced me, and I hesitated to contribute in conversations. But how over the years and over time, as we engage in our respective careers as Indigenous people, we challenge ourselves to replace those descriptors with our own. And we find our own through our respective careers. Through the arts, I have found a different narrative through a relationship between my mother and her grandmother, Dahil. Dahil adopted and raised my mother, and my mother talks often of that time and her childhood memories, and in the way that she talks and the words that she uses, a living story emerged. And so it is in those ways that I replace negative words with words of love and strength and sacrifice. Those 3 words come to mind when I think of Dahil and the way that my mother talks of her. And so this time I want to spend some time on what those words, how those words affected us in our life at the time. Much of the earlier language and communication used in our transition years shamed us into silence. But we are living in times when Indigenous ways of being and how they are being shared and told by us, for us, in our languages, these are being revived and strengthened because we still have living connections and access to living memories of ancestors. Hearing these stories told, memories shared in the traditional languages and in the way of the elders allows us to collect puzzle pieces and emotions, which allows us to create living images, songs, and music, which then allows us to turn them into part of our living in our life, in our creation. I've had the privilege of being in the arts for over 30 years. As I learn the craft of writing and explore other ways of expression in arts, I view the old perspective from one lens, but am rewriting it and shifting that lens and that view. And I've begun to write my narrative from that shifting perspective that I'm finding through my art and my writing. The narrative becomes clearer as I am more honest in my writing and in my creating, less afraid to be honest. Ways of creating and creating art has rewired how I choose to heal and be in my creative space. But this last piece was that kind of light bulb switched on moment for me. Writing and creating art has given me permission to challenge and dissolve, undo, entrenched ilira. To ilirasuk. Ilira is the root word, emotional fear. And what I mean by that is I started the early part of my career deferring always to the ones who know better. And it wasn't a respect-disrespect relationship, but rather I just never ever came to believe that I had equal contribution in process. I just deferred always to somebody else has a higher value than I do. Whatever work I was doing, whatever I was being a part of, I devalued very naturally. It was, I'm worth less than they are, I defer. Because I was afraid of those words. I was afraid the words would hurt me and they would bury me further. But I am fortunate in that my career has also become my healer. So as I create art, as I write, as I peel back layers, those words change, they shift, the perspective is changing. The words are being replaced. I go back to language and my mother's stories, and I realize in there is healing, which is why they are so important to share. So that has been a critical piece of first, my healing, enough that I know now I have value in the world I'm creating, in the world that I am participating in. And there's just no other way to look at it. And one of the ways that we come to that is coming out of hiding. So the control narrative that shamed me into creative hiding for so long has, by nature of being creative, creating and created, it can't stay silent. Art bubbles. Writing and song and music and art, it lives. And because it allows for something very powerfully obvious to reveal itself through the process of creating art. And one of the things I have learned, one of my first lessons, was that my ancestors had and have this ability to adapt. They had an ability to utilize what was available to them in their daily living and life. They had the ability to utilize what they or we are given access to. So they were given access to nature, and they became one with earth, with Nuna. We have this still as Inuit, but we're also given access to all these other things. So all that damage that was done, we work to heal. And we have access now to those living stories and to all the stuff to mend that for us, by us. And what's transferred from our ancestors is that adaptability to utilize those pieces so that we are healing and getting better through the stories, through the way they are told, the language that is used, the memories that are shared. And this gives me access to information, allowing for a view to be created through a new lens. And I use that perspective to heal, which creates capacity for more. As I get better, I want to get better. I want to create more. So there's this beautiful thing that happens as we get better, as we access these things. This need for truth comes from my mother's words and stories of Tahilq, because her stories gave me access to a love between the two. When my mother speaks of Tahilq, she speaks of being loved. She remembers that love even today. Tahilq loved her so deeply that generations later, we still feel that love through my mother's stories and from our mother. This humanizes Tahilq and our ancestors and that generation. These emotions breathe life into stories and images. They were real people. They lived an incredible life. And we need to celebrate those lives, and we do through our respective careers and through our art. One of those ways, and a piece I have been creating, is this mixed media piece. I think I landed on a title for this piece. I call it Amaw. And so as I peel back layers and find my narrative, my story, as I hear the language being used by my mother to talk and share her memories and those emotions, pieces come together. And so this piece is what I have created so far, and this is Amaok, and this is my mixed media piece of Tahiok. And the writing that accompanies this stage of this mixed media piece is this one here. Mamilunga kihia. Amauma naglingnia huli taimauman. Sanangwak punga, titirak punga, amauma inusia, kawimayaw kublugu, puigok daw kunago. Unikaw saka, titirak baka, sanginakmin nangyaklunga, amaw ka, una, sangiyulangwan. I heal because Tahiok's love demands it. I create because Tahiok's love inspires. I rewrite my story from a new lens and a new position of strength because it started with Tahiok and she was strong. And so as these pieces fall into place, as new words are being formed and a relationship from those words is forged, a new lens is coming through, and I'm seeing through that new lens and rewriting that narrative. And this is the time to do it. When these pieces fall into place, I return to the child I was before the bad words became entrenched in me. And I replace them with words of love and sacrifice and strength. And I become more proud to be Inuk. I am proud to be Tahiok's great-granddaughter. I am proud to be Doctor's daughter. I am proud to be Haunak Dolmud because Tahiok demanded it. Koyan Namik, thank you. And I hope you'll join me for my final piece where I will show and reveal the final piece of the mixed media Amaok piece and sing a song written for and inspired by ancestors and the stories and the correcting of the narrative and the challenge there in the song being hear a truth, stop the stigma of those indigenous people and replace it with this incredible story. These kinds of stories, they're out there and we need to share them. Koyan Namik, thank you.